Thank you. Sunan Dahal has been involved in sales and marketing since the early 2000s upon landing Australia from his home country, Nepal. While a late bloomer when it came to drinking, he gained a love for gin and has always been passionate about being involved in the gin industry. When there was an opportunity in 2020 to get involved in award-winning distiller Damien McKee's new and exciting gin, he didn't hesitate to jump in. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous today. The name.
Doing great.
This name, Bright Gin, reminds Suman of all the times he saw the night skies in Hobart, and also thought it was a famed Aurora Australis. We will hear all about the gin tonight, and also the award-winning gin Bright Night, and also the very small taste is also on the offer. Thank you.
Thanks, Idan, and great to be here. So I'm Suman, as Idan said, from Bright Night Gin. So that's our gin company. It's a collaboration between myself and Damien Mackey, who is our distiller. So we'll talk about that in more detail. Today, I'm not going to talk about our gin as much. I'm going to talk about gin in general. Right, so I'm going to talk about the history of gin, how gin came about, how gin is made, what makes one gin different from another, all of those kind of things. So at the end of this session, I expect everyone to be experts in gin. Right. So we'll start. So those just quickly before I jump into the agenda. So those that's the three Bright Night Gin expressions that we've got. And those are the awards that we've won. Okay, so the agenda for today is we're going to talk about the history of gin, how gin came to be, what it is today, what are all the steps, what happened along the way. For that, we're also going to talk about how gin is made. We're going to talk about what are the different kinds of gin. We're going to talk about the different botanicals that goes into the gin that makes gin what it is. We're going to talk about how gin used to be drank, how it's drunk now, what cocktails are famous. Then we're going to talk a little bit about our gin. We're going to talk about, what we're doing with our gin. We're going to talk a little bit about sustainability, how we're trying to, make it better, the world environment where we're sustainable. Then we're going to do a bit of gin tasting. When we taste the gin, what do we look at when we're tasting the gin? So that's the exciting part after all the boring stuff. And then we're going to do a bit of Q&A. So before I start, anybody here knows where gin started from? Any guesses? Sorry? Gin. Nah. So a lot, because the famous one is London dry gin. Everybody kind of thinks it's London, but in reality it's from Netherlands or Holland back in the day, right? So that's a history of gin on the screen there. So I'll just quickly go through a little bit of science, the distillation process. So when it comes to alcohol, you've got beer and wine, which is created using a fermentation process, which is not a lot of alcohol content. So to get to any reasonably good alcohol with good content, you have to go through a distillation process. So I'm sure everybody knows distillation. You turn liquid, turn that into paper, you cool it down at the other end, and that is the distillation process. So distillation is a key thing when it comes to making gin, vodka, whiskey, all of those high alcohol content alcohol. So distillation process, it's been around for 2000 years, but it really, it's around the 865 to 925 is where the Arabic alchemists started distilling wine. So if initially when we talk about spirits, what they did was they distilled wine to get a higher percentage alcohol content, and that was your spirit. It wouldn't have tasted any good. It would not have been any good back in those days, but that's the process they went through. So 1269 is when we hear about these Dutch monks talking about juniper health drinks. Now, back in those days, if you went to a doctor, if you had a small kind of issue, you know, you got fever, you got stomach pain, all of that, the doctor will give you alcohol, right? And the reason, there is a reason for that. One, it will just, you know, make you less susceptible to pain. Obviously, it'll get you to sleep, right? And then people will think, oh, this is great. But alcohol is also a really good solvent. So you know, if you wanted to put some medicine in water, it's not going to dissolve as well as it does in alcohol. So that's another reason. Interestingly, I grew up in Nepal, and you know, as a kid, if you had a cough, you get the cough syrup, and back in those days, it had a bit of alcohol in there, so you get drowsy, all of that. So I had a bit of a head start. Very wild days when I was young. So 1560 is when, you know, people distilled that wine, and then they put juniper berry in there, and then they started calling it Geneva, right? So that's how the name comes about. So Geneva is the Dutch word for juniper berry, which is put in this alcohol to make it taste good. So back in the days, it wasn't that great, right? So once people start putting herbs, they start putting botanicals, then it started to be like, oh, hold on, we could start drinking this. So that's back in those days. When Geneva was started, it just took off. So in Amsterdam in 1600s, there were about 400 distilleries. So it was just huge. It eventually made its way to England, and then, you know, it was well received. It was a expensive drink, so it was only for the rich people. But around 1689, King William III, I think, from London, they were just having fights everywhere. So he decided, didn't like France. He's like, I'm going to ban all French spirits, and I'm going to start a spirit industry in England. So that's why gin started becoming readily available, right? Also, just before that, Dutch courage that we hear, you know, when we hear, that's all also, you know, gin based. So back in those days, Dutch people, they just love to fight. They'll go down, you know, any excuse, they'll just go and invade and start fighting. So Geneva, when they drank, obviously, you know, it's all drunk people just going around and fighting. So that's how the Dutch courage word comes about. So 1689, King William bans French spirits, and then it created this uprising of gin in London, right? And it just became nuts, right? So apparently 75% of all homes in London were distilling gin, right? So 3 out of 4 homes were distilling gin. They were drinking on average about 50 liters per person in London at that time, right? So it's just nuts. So they call it the gin craze. And at that time, instead of Geneva, they started calling it Geneva. So that's a photo from 1750s. That's one of the painters he's talked about. He's kind of tried to recreate what it was like with the gin craze days. So if you look at that, there's a lady who's drunk, her kid is falling off the thing. There's a guy who is chewing on a bone, and the other end, the dog is doing that. So it just, that's a representation of what London was in those days. So hopefully after we do the gin tasting, none of that happens. Yeah. All right. So about 100 years later is when we really started to see what was the London dry gin, where it was a bit more distilled. You know, there were guidelines around it, and it was more clear. So that's how we get to London dry gin. Now we'll go to how it came to about in Australia, how the gin. So after 1800s, really, gin went really well, but then the World Wars caused a lot of issues in supply chains with grains, with botanicals. So it kind of died down. It became your, grandma's drink, right? So the grandma drinks that. But around 2000s is when it's made a comeback. Now in Australia, spirits took off much later than Europe, right? So we credit it to Bill Lark, who is widely regarded as the grandfather of spirits in Australia. So he is the man who started the most significant, first significant distillery in Tasmania, the Lark Distillery, and started creating whiskey. His brother, John Lark, went to South Australia and Kangaroo Island and started the first significant gin distillery there. in 2006. So it's very, very new. The first time where gin was in the map in the world, Australian gin, was when West Winds, which is a Western Australian gin, they went into San Francisco, which is the biggest gin awards, and 2 of the gins got double gold. That's where people started when, okay, there's good gin coming out of Australia. Before that, it was pretty much London and Europe where you'd go to see good gin. The next big event is Poltergeist, which is another gin, which won 2 platinums, double platinum in 2019 and 2020. So to get a double platinum, you have to win double gold 3 years in a row. To get a double gold, when you go to an awards thing, let's say there are 10 judges. If all the 10 judges classify that gin as a gold award, that's how you get a double gold. If only 9 of them do, right, then it doesn't become a double gold. And then another significant event, 2021, Right Now Gin was started. So it's all right. So how do we make gin, right? So gin is pretty much your neutral spirit with juniper berries. So you could take a neutral spirit is vodka. So you could take vodka, put some juniper berries in there, let it seep, take it out, and you've got gin, right? So you can make your own gin in that way. It's a little bit more complex when you go commercial, but that is classified as a gin. So what you do with gin to make gin is you take your neutral spirit, which could be grain, which could be, but it's pretty much tasteless, right? So like water is on the other, compared to Coca-Cola and water, for example, water is a neutral kind of liquid. In spirits, vodka is similar to a neutral liquid. It doesn't really have any flavor other than what the fermentation and distillation provided. So you've got your base spirit, then once you put juniper berry in that, it becomes gin. What distillers do is they add a lot of botanicals to it and then just create that unique kind of taste. Now you could have anywhere from single botanical, which is your juniper berry, to 50, 100. There's no limit to how many you can add in there, so how many botanicals. So there's a gin called Monkey 47, which is I think a European gin, and they've got 47 botanicals in there. Our Brother gin has 14 botanicals in there. Roku, which is a popular one, has about 6 botanicals in there. 4 pillars, I think they're about 11, 12, right? So for any good gins, you'll see about 5 or 6, at least 5 or 6, because there are some botanicals you need to put in there for all those other flavorings to work together, right? So we've got one called orris root, which is the root of the iris flower. So that you'll see that in a lot of different kind of gins, and it's not because you want the taste of that. It does give an earthy taste, but it is because its molecules binds all those other flavoring molecules, and when you're distilling it, those flavors come out to the other end. So your first step is taking your spirit and your botanicals and seeping them in Bright Night Gin. We seep the botanicals, right? Then we distill that after 24, 48 hours. Some other companies, what they do is in the distilling process, they've got these buckets and they put, for example, coriander seeds in there, they put cinnamon bark in there. And what happens is as the vapors go up, it takes those flavorings and comes out the other end. So there are different ways of getting that flavoring to the distilled product. Once it's distilled, it's pretty strong. So once it's distilled, you're seeing about 70 to 80% alcohol in there. So it needs to be diluted. So water's boiling point is 100 degrees. So once you boil water at 100 degrees, it will turn into vapor, but alcohol is at 78 degrees. So, when you keep your still at 78 degrees, so your alcohol makes it way to the other end, and a very small amount of water does. So that's the distillation process. So you come up to the other end with gin, then you dilute it we keep ours at 45%, and it goes from anywhere from 37% to about 57%, depending on how much alcohol you want in your spirit. So what is used to do that? And then some companies, our pink gin, for example, after you've got that gin, you can flavor that as well. So you can add more things after the distillation process. So that's how you make gin. Okay. So we'll talk about gin types. So the most popular one and the normal one, our blue bottle that you can see in there, is a London dry gin. So the London dry gin, it doesn't have to come from London. It can come from anywhere. What it has to be is it has to be at least 37% alcohol level. So it can't be lower than that. It has to be all the botanicals and flavors have to be distilled. So you can't add anything later. It has to be, the predominant flavor has to be juniper berry. So that has to be when you sip it, you feel that the most, and you feel notes of other elements in that. It has to be clear, which is usually the process once you distill it, and you can't add anything else to it except then water. The next one, which is quite famous now, is contemporary, which is also distilled, but juniper is not the predominant flavor. So if you think, if you're a big fan of, let's say, pepperberries, cardamom, cinnamon, so you've got that as your majority botanical, and you've got a little bit of juniper berry, you distill it, that's a contemporary gin. And then we've got the flavored, slow gin. Slow gin is flavored gins are, you create the gin, then you flavor it with other flavors, then you don't have to distill it. So our pink gin, the middle one in that photo there, that's a flavored gin. So we take our distilled gin, then we take this big tub, then we pick these Martis berries up in northwest Tasmania, handpick, we put them in this tub, then we fill that with our normal gin, and we stir it once a week for 6 months, and at the end of that, it has that fragrance and flavor of the berries. So that's our pink gin. There's also barrel-aged gin now, so that's quite famous. So if you've had 4 kilo Shiraz gin, that's a barrel-aged gin. So you take your gin, you put it in a cask. It could be a whiskey, it could be a wine. You mature it in that cask. It pulls all the flavors from that cask, and then you take it out. So our new gin that's coming out is a barrel-aged gin. With me and Damien are both fans of Chardonnay. So we took a Chardonnay barrel from a local Tasmanian winery, and then we've been maturing our gin in there for 3 months. We've just decanted it, and we're just in the process of bottling that. So, your barrel-aged gin could be Chardonnay, Shiraz, Pinot, could be whiskey, brandy, or all sorts of stuff. The other one is Old Tom. So London Dry is, it's not sweet. The sugar molecules don't make it in the distillation process. So Old Tom is a bit more sweetened. So, I'm sure you guys know when it comes to alcohol and chemistry, when you say dry, it just means that there's no sugar in there, right? So that's dry. Old Tom is a bit sweeter than London Dry, but usually not as sweet as a flavored gin. And then there's some other gins like Plymouth. I don't even know how to pronounce that. But yeah, so there's a few other types of gin, but these are your main types of gins. Next. So how do you differentiate one gin from the other is what botanicals go into that process. The distillation process is quite, similar in all the different gins, but the botanicals are very different. We've just talked about this a fair bit. So you could have a, citrusy gin. Some of the gins are floral. Roku is a floral gin. Ours is a more earthy, dusty, spicy kind of gin. So there's a ton of different flavor profiles that you can, when you put your botanicals, that make it true. You can't put, anything. There are some things you can't put because it doesn't make it through the distillation process, right? So you could, let's say I want to add a tomato for my gin. I'm not sure if it's going to make it to the other end. So there are some things that make it, some things that don't. You could always flavor that later, but in the distillation process, in your London Dry gin, you may not be able to put whatever you want in there. But those are all the botanicals, and that's not an that's not a full list. For example, the botanicals we use, it's not on that list. So we use a lot of, so that's the 14 botanicals we use on our London Dry gin. And some of them are Tasmanian, some of them are Australian, some of them are imported. So that's the botanicals, yeah. Okay, so how gin drank? This is probably the easiest one that everybody knows about. Initially, gin was drank with hot water. This is before tonic water came about. Back in those days, you just used to drink it with hot water. Malaria was a big deal back in the days. So what started happening in South America is this tribe started getting the bark of this cinchona tree and started putting them in water, mixing that and drinking that as a cure for malaria, right? So that's the element in that, quinine, is the one that is in the tonic water today. So that, gin and tonic slowly became the popular one because of its, because it was a cure for malaria, right? Winston Churchill, famously known for saying that the gin and tonic has saved more Englishmen lives and minds than all the doctors of Europe. Because when they were going through war, when they're going through their massive expansion, they were drinking tons of gin and tonic. Back in those days, it would have been pretty rough. There are people who just went, nah, I'm not drinking that. I'd rather die from malaria, right? So yeah. So, but around 1800s, carbonated water was invented, and then it all became pretty nice and smooth after that. Nowadays, the most famous way to gin drink is with gin and tonic, and the golden ratio is 2:1. So 2 gins, 2 to 1. That's the way I drink. That's my golden ratio, right? So 1 gin and 2 tonics, right? So that's what it is. But again, if you're not a fan of tonic water, we've talked about what's a healthy drink, right? A healthy drink is the lowest calorie drink, right? And then you could do gin and soda, which would be very similar to a vodka and soda. So that's your low calorie. As soon as you start getting into cocktails, there's a lot of calories in there. Right, so they put most cocktails use simple syrup, which is just a sugary liquid. It's so when you look at a cocktail recipe, there's no simple syrup mentioned in there, but there's a lot of sugar in there. So if you want to stay healthy, get a drink. It's a vodka soda, gin and soda. Tonic water with a low sugar content is really good as well. Right, so we sell our gin with the Tasmanian Tonic Water Company, and they're about 2% sugar content. Right. So there is a healthy way of drinking alcohol, which is that. So that's the gin drinks, and I think okay. So I thought this was the gin tasting, but we'll just go through our gin now. So Bright Night Gin, that's our gin. It's a collaboration between Victoria and Tasmania. So it's distilled in Tasmania, bottled in Tasmania, sold, the company set up in Victoria, and we sell through that. It's named after Aurora Australis. All the times I've been in Hobart, I've seen anything pink or bright, I'm like, that's Aurora Australis. Obviously not. Yeah, so one day I will see it. If in 5 years I don't see it, I have to legally, take myself out of the company. So I have to see this as Aurora Australis. We've got 14 botanicals. Some of them are Tasmanian, some of them are Australian. We'll talk about that in a second, and a lot of them are imported botanicals. Then we've got the pink gin, which has got the myrtus berries, and the barrel gin, which has got the Chardonnay grapes. We went through 42 tastes to get to this, what we're tasting now. And those were some really golden years where Damien will just send me all these samples once a week, and I'll just be drinking all the time. And I realized that as I'm going through this taste, I'm very critical the first few times I try it. But as I'm going through the 5th taste, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a 9 or a 10, right? So we're not 100% sure if Bright Night Gin is the best taste, or if it's the one that was the last on the list and we went, yeah, this is the best. So we've got 2 expressions, and the third one, the barrel gin. We're going to bottle that next month. We've won a few awards. We've won Asia Pacific Spirit of the Year in the China Wine and Spirits Award, which was a big deal for us because we competed against whiskeys. So it was in the overall spirits competition, and it has only been won by whiskeys before. And now it was the first gin to win that. We've got a focus on taste. So we want to make, the best craft gin in the market. We work with a lot of community ones. We work with a footy club. We work with, there's a movie coming out, with the gin in there. and we're very sustainable. So we'll go through the sustainability next. So yeah, just really quickly, so those are the genes that we've got, our London dry gene, the pink gene, which is with the Martis berries, and the barrel gene, a gene that's coming up next. Yeah, we'll go to the next one. Okay, so quick intro to Damien and Mad, who are the distillers of this. So that's on the left there, that's the distillery behind them. So they've been, involved in the spirits game for a long time. So Damien spent a lot of time with Bill Lark, who was the grandfather of, spirits in Australia. They established their, first distillery, Mackie Distillery in 2006, where they started doing whiskey. They've been distilling gin and whiskey since then. His whiskeys have earned the liquid gold status in the Whiskey Bible, which is the biggest name for whiskey ratings, and his Poltergeist gin, which won the double platinum, is his previous gin. So this is his new gin. 2019, he started his own he wanted more Tasmanian, more Australian gin with native botanicals, new taste, and that's how Bright Night Gin came about. So my background is in sales and marketing, and Damien's gin was the first gin I tasted. So ever since I told Damien, I'm like, Damien, if you ever get into any gin, and make sure to reach out to me. And then eventually around 2020, I think around Christmas time, we sat down and said, let's start a new gin, which is how Bright Night Gin came about. So next, sustainability, we're big on sustainability. One advantage of being a Tasmanian gin is it's already carbon negative, because Tasmania is carbon negative. All that hydroelectricity they produce is being used everywhere. So we tend to utilize that a lot. We tend to do our distilling in Tasmania, bottling, even though it's more expensive, packaging, warehousing, we tend to do all of that in Tasmania. Our warehouse in Melbourne as well, we use solar, and it creates twice as much solar electricity than it uses. Where we use a lot of local botanicals. As soon as things have to move, that's where carbon comes into the picture, right? So we try and minimize that. We use organic. It's hard to, at the start, just be completely carbon negative, but we're working towards that. All of our packaging that's within our control is pretty much all paper. So the seal on the top of the bottle, the tamper-proof seal, is the only thing that's plastic, and the tape that goes into when we deliver to other companies. But everything else, we pack in paper. Our labels are paper. Everything we try to make it as paper. And now the satchel that it gets delivered is biodegradable. So you can take that, just put it in your soil in your garden, and it will degrade in about 2 weeks. So that's the end of the presentation, and this is where the exciting time starts. So we could start doing the tasting. So you guys have heard all about it. Let's have a taste of it.
Guys, I'll be very quick. We want to really thank our special guest speaker, Suman, for doing this. It's actually a very special one. Normally we don't have something like this. So it's great to have you, Suman. Thank you very much for that. So we have a small gift for you.
Oh, awesome.
It's actually a very special gift. It's Rotary socks.
Oh, awesome.
You like
Thank you.
socks?
Yeah, how did you know I wasn't wearing socks today?
You can now you have.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
So yeah, so guys, look, I'm gonna close the meeting for today. I want to thank the organizing committee, the evening meeting, and also each and every one of you who joined the meeting over here as well as online. Our next meeting will be at at Sofitel number 35, and again it's a special event aligning with T20 Cricket World Cup. So it's going to be a great one for the cricket lovers. And our guest speaker will be the retired Australian cricketer and broadcaster Brad Hodge. So don't forget to register yourself and book it in, and have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.